Anna Sale, what's the main thing you've learned in your lifetime so far?
Skip, the main thing that I've learned so far in my lifetime is that talking about hard things with other people is necessary, it's transformative, and right now it's particularly urgent.
That was The Main Thing. Timeless wisdom shared by our wise guests here on The Main Thing podcast. It resonated with us, perhaps rather deeply. You spoke up. You said, we want more from these wise thought leaders. We heard you loud and clear, and so we are reconnecting with a few of our most popular guests from seasons 1 and 2. We will revisit those guests and revisit their wisdom, their main thing. What will we find? Some say true north will always be true north. Others say there's nothing permanent except change. Has it remained the primary driving force in their life? Or has something new taken that place of prominence in their heart and mind? Here in this special episode of Wisdom Revisited, we'll find out how each prior guest has applied and perhaps evolved their wisdom. Here we go. Anna Sale, so great to have you back with us on the Main Thing podcast.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So Anna, that clip we just heard was recorded in September 2020, episode 32 of the Main Thing podcast. Gosh, we've been through a few things since then, haven't we?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't really know where we are in time and space. 2020 feels like both ages ago and also yesterday.
I know.
Because I think I'm recording with a very similar setup today that I had in 2020 with you, because I'm still working primarily from home. But then I stop and I think about how much has happened in our world since then. And it's pretty astonishing.
Let me remind folks who they're hearing from. Anna is the host and founder of the fabulous award-winning podcast, Death, Sex, and Money. Anna, you and your show have won numerous awards and recognition, including Gracie and Webby Awards. Mm-hmm. You're a professional journalist, someone who's worked for public radio in the earlier part of your career for nearly a decade, where you covered politics. And I love the list of notables who you've had the honor and privilege of interviewing, folks like Jane Fonda, Kevin Bacon, and Madeleine Albright, just to name a few. Mm-hmm. More recently, you became a published author. Your book, which is now also available in paperback, is titled Let's Talk About Hard Things. And I'm proud to have a signed copy right here, my signed copy. Just terrific. Anna, thanks. Congratulations for writing a book, and thanks for writing the book that you did.
Oh, thank you.
I know last time we spoke, you were splitting time between Berkeley, California, and Wyoming, I believe, or Montana. Mm-hmm. Yeah, are you still?
Wyoming.
Okay. Are you and your family still heading over there fairly frequently?
Yeah, we'll go in the summertime. My husband is a wildlife biologist, and he does a lot of work in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem and has a lot of collaborators who live and work in that landscape. So we go every summer. So it's pretty exciting. I'll say it's kind of interesting. In Wyoming, people talk, I used to cover politics. People talk a lot about like what's going to happen with Liz Cheney. And of course, like as a West Virginian, I feel like I have been asked to explain Joe Manchin to a lot of people.
Of course, yeah.
So I feel like the combination of like West Virginia connection and Wyoming connection has made me a very sought after water cooler political commentator.
For sure, an explainer.
Yeah.
Well, rounding out your bio, a mom to 2 daughters, a wife. What am I missing? What else should we add to that bio to remind folks who they're hearing from today?
Oh, let's see. I mean, the other thing, just meant to mention that I came up in West Virginia, went to public schools in West Virginia. Is there anything else? I mean, I'm a lot of other things, but those are the most, certainly, wife, mother, and podcast host are the most. Thank goodness I don't have to work that hard at being an author anymore because the book is finished. So that's good.
We'll talk more about the book. I want to go into that and ask you some questions about what's happened and how that affected you publishing a book. I want to transition back to your main thing from episode 32. As we heard, you said, we need to talk to others about hard things. It's necessary and it can be wonderfully transformative. And so I want to kind of call the question, Anna, is this still your main thing, or has something new perhaps emerged as your true north of late?
Oh, that's really interesting, Skip. I hadn't re-articulated that to myself. I do think my main thing has shifted a little bit.
Yeah, tell us about that.
It's interesting. It kind of came out with, this book that I worked on for a lot of years it's called Let's Talk About Hard Things. So it was that was the thesis, that creating conversation around our tender spots and our places of uncertainty, and kind of pushing ourselves to be a little bit more open and vulnerable with one another, how that can be transformative.
I'm quietly clapping.
Believe that. Yeah, I think that's totally true. But, after going through the experience of having this book come out into the world and talking a lot about it, and talking about my own hard things, and talking with other people about their hard things, and just really leaning into talking about hard things during a time of a lot of hard things in people's lives, I found myself so craving, I just wanted to change the channel to the Great British Baking Show every so I needed a different tone, and I needed it both in my personal life and how I thought about my work, and also just creatively. I started noticing that just it felt too heavy. And so this is not the biggest shift, because I still believe all that, but I find myself very focused on the let's part of the Let's Talk About Hard Things, which is that idea of gathering and finding out what happens when we try to live a little bit more intentionally in community, and reaching out, and still acknowledging that hard things exist, making it safe for hard things to be distracting you, but
balance that, I think, right? Balance that with...
balance it. And one way that I did that with the paperback coming out, this was kind of crazy, but I was instead of doing a bunch of book talks where I talk to people and they interview me about what I wrote about the hard things in my life and the hard things in other people's lives, I was what if we have a couple of karaoke sing-along parties where we sing songs about hard things? Because there are a lot of great sing-along songs about hard things.
And I saw that. I saw your karaoke initiative on social. I think I saw it on Twitter, and I threw a song or two in there for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I was I don't know what, this might be just totally weird. People might show up and be like, "What are you asking us to do? You're asking us to get in a room with strangers and sing along with a karaoke performer?" And I was going to say, yes, we're going to try it. And I did them. I did one in San Francisco and one in New York last week, and I have to tell you, they were the best.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. Awesome.
And so I don't know what that means, Skip. You might talk to me, and my main thing might be becoming a touring karaoke host in 18 months. I don't know. but it's kind of interesting.
Oh my gosh. So you've got 2 under your belt. Are there plans for more karaoke gatherings?
Well, I some people saw it on social, and one of my dear friends who lives in Cody, Wyoming was like, "Can we do this in Cody too?" And I was like, you know what? You can. It's really not that hard. You just figure out how to project lyrics on the wall, and you can just sing along with recordings. So it's very portable, the karaoke sing along party. So who knows? Who knows how many more I'll host?
That's great. Well, I can't remember, what was your hook that you asked us, the theme that you built around? We're supposed to give you a song that we go to when such and such.
Yeah, it was a song that you have found yourself sort of singing along to, that just hits that place where you're like, "Ugh, this is the song I needed right in this moment."
Right.
I can think of going through various life transitions, and you just hear that one song on the radio, or you pull up that one classic song, and so we have a whole playlist of those kinds of songs that people submitted.
Oh my gosh, I know. I think I sent you a Tears for Fears song, possibly Shout, Shout, Let It All Out.
It's a good one.
And a Toad the Wet Sprocket song, which I'm not going to be able to recall the title to, but both were on theme. So, Oh my gosh, how fun. Let's be honest, it's not easy to ask for help or talk about money. Hey, it's Skip here, and many listeners like you continue to ask me, what do you need to continue to develop and build this show? Well, for context, it takes our team about 15 hours of work to produce each one of these packages of wisdom that we deliver to you in podcast form. Really, what we need as we enter season 3 of this show is funding to cover our costs. So in response, I formed a site on the Patreon platform where you can elect to become a supporting patron of the Main Thing podcast. Now, there are 3 levels you might consider, ranging from $6 to $27 per month. It's all safe and secure, and you can explore the options at patreon.com/themainthingpodcast. Now, how will we use the funding? Funds provided by you and other patrons will be used to defray the costs of production, promotion, and our recurring technology expenses each month. In short, you will be helping to keep this pipeline of wisdom flowing. Thanks. Publishing a book, was that something on your bucket list? I think you're a journalism major. Did you ever think that you would become an author, and did you have on your bucket list to publish a book?
I don't know if I was ever courageous enough to put it on a bucket list, but certainly I can remember, I worked in a bookstore when I was a teenager. Like I can remember I've always loved books. And so, yeah, on the other side, I can say it's pretty cool that I now have a book that I can hold. And I just took my kids to the public library yesterday to get some kids' books to read. And we checked, and they had my book on the shelf in the library. And my girls got to see it. It's like,
let's check for Mom's
cool.
book.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Did you have any idea how timely your book would be? Given the topic, it would be published right smack in the middle of a pandemic that disrupted everything. And your thesis was to encourage us to be open to talking about hard things and to get better at and more comfortable at talking about hard things. Did you have any clue how timely it would be?
No. I didn't. It's interesting to think about. The thesis of it really grew from the origins of Death, Sex, and Money, which we launched 8 years ago this month. So it started in 2014, and it has been really interesting to sort of think about the culture in that moment. I go back from time to time and look at my pitch document when I was just coming up with the rough sketch of what Death, Sex, and Money was going to be, and I really do feel like it's not that long ago, but there was just not the same kind of rich landscape of different podcasts and even storylines and television and movies that just got into some of the really, tough stuff. And so I think that it's certainly been pandemic times that have just created the necessity of you have to say I'm doing okay this week. You don't just, just to open up this possibility of things are not going all right. We now know socially we have that muscle because of the pandemic. But I do think there's been an opening up even before the pandemic of just recognizing there were a lot of ways that we were asking people to hold a lot as individuals because of the ways that the organization of our communities and our society has changed, that there were starting to be cracks where people needed to talk about this stuff. And so I feel like the book was, certainly very timely. And also I feel really encouraged that it feels like came out in this ecosystem where it's not that hard of an argument to make. I think people recognize that talking about hard things, you might not want to do it, but it's hard to argue that you don't need to do it from time to time with trusted people you love.
Anna, I want to take your advice and talk about some hard things. What's something in your life or work that popped up and surprised you a bit because it was hard and unexpectedly so? Was it maybe something about getting your team back to work or marriage or parenting? What was a hard thing that kind of tapped you on the shoulder and said, hey, Anna, here I am. You need to talk about me and deal with me?
Oh, let's see. One thing that I have really been noticing and thinking about a lot is there's in my life, in my marriage, there's been like a change in whose workload is more demanding.
Okay.
And in my case, so I was working on this book on top of hosting a podcast and having a full-time job. And I was, for a couple of years, like I was the one who was taking on more than you really ought to with work.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was me. And with two little kids and just after the book came out, my husband started kind of having more conversations with people who work in conservation policy, and he took on the extra work starting officially at the beginning of 2022 of doing some advising to the United States Department of Agriculture on wildlife conservation. On
How
top
cool.
of, he's a professor at UC Berkeley. And so we've had this total kind of like shake up, not just in like who like now he used to work primarily in Pacific time, and now he's got these Washington people who are calling him on East Coast time at 7 a.m. our time when I start with my New York colleagues. So we've had this sort of change in the architecture of our work lives. But I think the thing that's been the hardest is getting used to like, he's the one who's got the sort of running distraction of work in a more intense way than I used to. And so I think what's been hard for me is, or just a learning, it's like really telling myself like, okay, like the way that it has been and how our partnership operated, like it's resetting because we're in a different phase now. Like I was the one who was doing the extracurricular stuff on top of, and now he is. And so, and if you don't like, I have found if I don't remind myself of this new season and this new era, you can find plenty of reasons to be resentful and mad because there is plenty of labor to be done when it comes to running a household and loving and caring for little kids. So that's been a thing that I feel like I've been really trying to pay attention to and learn. And when I have a snag, try to catch myself and talk about it with him. And we've talked with a couples counselor about it. Like we've just been like, we are in this new season. How do we reset and how do we get to know this new season so we don't just like have squabbles pop up?
Yeah, and that sounds like a kind of a structural change that's, the underpinning of it there. And that's a biggie. So applaud you for the way you guys are dealing with that. Yeah.
I mean, it's
not
one of those
easy,
like,
is it?
oh gosh, this is new. Let's get to know this. Yeah.
Anna's thinking I was the striver, strainer, overachiever, do too mucher, and could fall back on hubby, and now that's not the case anymore. Gosh, thanks
I think strainer. I like strainer, not striver, because it's also like, it's both striver, because it's, I'm really proud of him. And also we can recognize when each of us do a little more than is, that it has trade-offs. Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, just thinking about the same time period, my answer would also be related to marriage. We've had a lot of big life changes. Daughter's gone off to college. My wife started working full-time out of the home at a medical office that has set hours that are, hard to change. When she's not there, bad things happen. Our son has a chronic illness that we're, past the 2-year point on all that. So we had a lot of big things to that popped up that we've had to change and adapt to. And something, evidence of that would be like getting the cooking done so we all can eat. That's different than it used to be. And, we've had to sort of shift and reallocate the duties there, and it's fine. It's just something that wasn't going to fix itself organically. It had to be some hard conversations, right? Some sacrifices, compromises, and actually like some calendaring, like, okay, Skip, you're going to cook on Tuesday nights and the kids are going to cook on Wednesday night, so it's been that sort of thing, but it's all good, as they say.
I know, but it takes, because the whole thing is I'm sure everybody wants to do, wants every need to be fulfilled. So just that all those landmines of guilt and feelings, frustrated, like it's tricky. I am a big proponent of the rotisserie chicken pickup from the grocery store.
Right.
Sometimes it's exactly what you need.
The fallback. Hey, hon, I'll just swing by and pick up a rotisserie chicken. How's that sound? Problem solved. Great. Oh, cut to the happy scene at the dinner table.
Exactly.
Oh, my goodness.
You just put it on a plate. It looks like you roasted it yourself. Yeah.
Oh, and look, they lit a candle. I'm just... Anna, I want to pick your brain. You speak with a lot of folks around the nation in your work, producing a podcast on the frequency that you do, with the range of topics that you do. You talk to people everywhere from all walks of life, different colors, different belief systems, different genders. And I wanted you, with that wonderful perspective that you have as a journalist, as an observer, as a conversation starter, I wanted to ask you, Anna, where you see America today as we hopefully, air quotes, hopefully emerge for good from this pandemic. I'm going to throw out a few descriptors just to get your wheels turning, and then I want to not put words in your mouth, but I want to hear what you're sensing about the mood of America today from where you sit. Are we cynical, divided? Are we hopeful? Are we confused? Are we scrambling? Are we dazed? Are we scared? Are we healing? Which if any of those would be true statements from where you sit?
Oh, I mean, I think that we are all of those in different moments, but I guess my primary sense is that we are, each of us in different communities and in our households, wherever we live, like I really feel like we're still bunkered, mm-hmm. And bunkered down in sort of survival mode. And when you're in a bunker, you invite in the people who feel the most familiar and the most safe, and you don't let anybody in who's different than that.
Yeah. And
I understand the instinct. I think it's going to tear us apart as a country. And I don't really know what to do about it.
Yeah. I sense real concern, Anna.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to my husband, before we turned on the light this morning about like, what is the country our daughters are growing up in? I think that, the thing that I like, we're speaking a week after the circulation of the draft opinion about, perhaps changing, the sort of current paradigm about abortion rights in this country. Mm-hmm. And I've thought a lot about, just as a journalist, like, and starting with as a journalist, like, okay, how do you, what is the way to cover this story that's going to get us to some new kind of understanding of like, yeah. I took in a lot of news and I was like, I've heard the ways this story is framed from people who are supporters of abortion rights. I've heard the ways the story is framed from people who oppose abortion rights through the courts, and there's not it's people, there's not a lot of room to come together when you have the fundamental differences in how you see the issue of abortion, and it's one of the most animating issues for people who vote. Yeah. And so, it's that issue makes me think a lot about like, what is the way other than trying to get more votes and overpower the other side, and then the other side is going to organize and try to overpower the next, like, what is the way for some durable way forward where you're not just fighting with each other all the time? Mm-hmm. And I don't know.
Not a force play.
Yeah. So I don't have a good answer, because I don't think just talking about hard things in that instance, I think people have very deep, sincerely held beliefs that lead you to very different conclusions on the issue of abortion. And I think it's, when that's the sort of, when that's in the air, yeah, when you are thinking about things like midterm elections, or like, mm-hmm, what is the field going to look like for, not that it's always about elections, but that's certainly the way that's the way we usually think about the mood of the country. But
Yeah. You said something I think is really important that I want to emphasize and just kind of check for understanding here, that there's this entrenchment that you were just talking to us about around a particular issue that's really big, can often be like a lightning rod or dividing issue. Entrenchment, and then in our political space, in that part of our mind, in our conversation, and then in our day-to-day life, given our lived experience of the pandemic, we're sort of in a bunker, hunkered down, a little bit of a protective mentality. We're not letting a lot of outsiders in. Gosh, that's kind of a double whammy there, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, I wouldn't, I don't know what to do, because it's, you think about what do you want to, my approach is never like, oh, I just need to try to convince this person to see the world the way I do, because I understand that that's fundamentally like, you're just setting a trap for backlash. So I don't know. I mean, the thing that I think about is like, what are the other parts of ourselves that you can appeal to, where you can say, we may disagree on this, and we can do this together. Like, for example, I don't know, figuring out ways to support families and I don't know, reproductive education, those sorts of things. But writ large, that's the challenge, is like, what are the things that we can focus on that aren't just a fight to the death? Yeah,
and disagree on this, but come together and compromise on the many things that we perhaps agree on. I think that's maybe what a path forward could look like. I hope so anyway. You brought up the Roe v. Wade issue that was in the news. It's been in the news, continues to be in the news. I had a wonderful moment I wanted to share with you. I had gone to pick up my 16-year-old son, and we were driving back from his activity. And in the conversation, he said, "Dad, I'd like to have a conversation with you about a really important and controversial topic." And he said, "Can we talk about something?" And I didn't know what it was. Maybe it should have been apparent to me, but I didn't know. But of course I said, yeah. And, as a parent, you're like licking your chops, because this is where the good stuff happens. And you're just thanking God, and you're thanking your lucky stars that they want to talk to you about something that they've deemed as important. So yeah, he wanted to, he said, "Hey, I'm hearing a lot about Roe versus Wade and abortion rights, and Dad, what do you think? Help me think through this. I've got friends that are all over the place, one side or the other." And we just had the most wonderful 15-minute conversation. I didn't try to tell him what he should think. We just talked about framing up the issue and what's important and where we could get reliable information and that sort of thing. But it was just a lifetime moment I'll never forget as a dad, that issue prompted us to have an important life conversation. And he's going to come, he's going to come to his own conclusion. I've given him a little bit of my perspective, but he'll form his own opinion. And I think he'll form a great one. But that conversation was just such a blessing that it happened.
Yeah. And how cool that story is. It's important for all people to have that conversation, but I particularly like that it was between a dad and his son, because so often, abortion gets talked about as a women's issue. And of course, it's something for all of us to find our way through and think about our responsibility.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time, Anna. Thank you for coming back and revisiting your wisdom and checking back in with us and talking about your book. This has just been a wonderful conversation, and I'm just so grateful for it.
Oh, thank you, Skip. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, my pleasure. Wow, that goes by incredibly fast, doesn't it? Time flies when you're hacking wisdom. I hope you're left wanting more. Sync up with us again next time on The Main Thing for 9 more minutes of wisdom.